while, bring in some outsider to give you an independent view. It's a great opportunity for this board to step forward and say, hey, let's do something different. Let's don't follow the same old routine. Let's do something a little bit different. Bring in an outsider, give them all the information, say, okay, come back with something for the staff. Don't use somebody that's already on your payroll. Bring in an outside group to do it. It's a unique opportunity. What I'd ask this board to do is lay this over and tell staff, find an outside company to do it, and then bring all the information back to us then. Lay it over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cross. Next, Andrea.
Following Andrea Harico would be Angela Logan had asked to speak on item 7 also.
Okay.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Andrea Ricco, and I'm a professor of preventive medicine at Keck School of Medicine of USC, where I also direct a community outreach and engagement program for the Southern California Environmental Health Sciences Center. I've been reviewing I'm not going to talk, I'm really only referencing the SCIG because it has something to do with Environ, but I've been reviewing the BNSF SCIG EIR and the health risk assessment that were conducted by Environ International, and I find many flaws with the document. So from my perspective, I think it would be good to have a fresh pair of eyes looking at this project. And it's extremely important to choose a consultant that can accurately look at what some of the health effects are going to be. These two projects together will have immense health effects in the area, and Environ has concluded for the SCIG that it's going to, it's going to be better here than it ever has been in the past. So I find just tremendous flaws with a lot of the assumptions that are made, with the way the traffic is analyzed, with the lack of knowledge and about transloading trends and everything in that document. So it makes me very concerned that that now the sister project will also be potentially be conducted by the same firm. And I'm certainly not a contracting expert in any way. That's not my background. My background's in public health. But I don't understand, despite what Mr. Cannon said about how Lisa went on maternity leave, and so Environ stepped in to fill her role with the JPA, and the document from Doug Thiessen, is that how he says his name? Executive Director of the JPA. He says that the ICTF JPA has entered into a one-year $150,000 contract with Environ, and that what you're doing tonight is doing the first amendment for that contract. That the previous contract was for services for the EIR, and this one is for them to finish the EIR. Did any of you ever vote to hire Environ to work for the JPA? That's what's really unclear to me in what he said. It sounds like Environ was hired by the Port of LA to assist with Lisa Osher's maternity leave, and then somehow they've gotten a contract now that is with the JPA, but it doesn't seem like the JPA voted on it because they don't seem to know a lot about Environ. And all of a sudden we're in a situation where Environ is about to get $1.5 million or whatever for doing the UPICTF EIR. So I don't understand that process, and I don't understand what your role was in voting for that and approving that contract. But I'm really curious, and from my perspective, again, I think it would be really important to have a fresh pair of eyes look at this project because there's so many flaws in the other draft EIR that's been done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Tom, do you want to answer that? Because that is a question. It really says right on here that that basically it's been entered into, and I think that's what we're here to approve, whether we enter into it or not. Isn't that
Yes.
correct?
Well, yes, you are, members, but recall that a few meetings ago you approved a resolution that delegated to the executive director of the JPA the authority to make contracts up to $150,000 and 1 year in length. And this is consistent with what is done in the Port of Los Angeles, and I believe approximately what's done in the Port of Long Beach. And it's done in order to allow the entity to do business in between board meetings. This board only meets once a year, and sometimes not even that frequently. It takes a little longer than that to get together. So in order for the JPA to continue in its business, there has to be some delegation to the executive director. That was the basis on which this particular contract was made with Environ in the gap. And what's being requested of you now is to increase that beyond the authority of the executive director, and so that's why it's coming to you at this time.
Okay, thank you. The other thing, well, let's get to the next speaker.
Yeah, Angelo Logan. And that's the last person who's signed
Okay.
up to speak on item number 7.
Thank you. Angelo Logan, East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice. So just to reiterate my comment earlier, I think that the board should, or the JPA should really reconsider bringing on Environ because of community scrutiny and community concern related to Environ. I think that in terms of the process, it should be a little bit more open. I don't know if RFP would be something adequate, but I do believe that for the public to participate in a more meaningful way, we should really step back and look at your options. I agree with some of the previous comments that having a different consultant working on this project will help to balance and look at the contrast between Environ's work and a different contractor. I also wanted to say a suggestion in terms of although I wasn't able to navigate the website, it might be a good idea to have the agenda packet here for the public for those folks that don't have access to the internet, and there is no agenda packet here. So again, if you can, I think reconsidering Environ, opening it up to include more of what they would be doing within their expanded contract. Will they be doing the HRA? If so, looking at some of their previous works related to HRAs and having more of public involvement in that decision-making process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I actually got okay, Mr. Cameron, I was going to ask you to respond to that because I think there are, this is a JPA joint project here, and I would already like to make sure what we do for whoever we end up with contracting this is what do we do for peer reviews, the HRA, everything in there for community input. Are we going to open it up more for the community, make sure, it's a transparent process of what's going on?
Trying to think how to respond to this question. I think the simplest way to respond to some of the comments and to the question you have, Mr. Chair, is that reminding the board and reminding everybody in the audience that Environ will be taking a project management role and will be putting together the pieces. They will not be conducting the technical analysis. The Exhibit B are the sub-consultants that were formerly sub-consultants to the AQMD when they were the prime putting the environmental document together. And they are different from the other project. I don't want to get into that, the adequacy, the professionalism and technical expertise and things of that nature. So I want to make that point clear. A good 90% of the technical analysis that AQMD was overseeing under those sub-consultants that now will currently be with the Environ team will be the same ones, and we will carry through that analysis they've done. I think they are technically sound, and they are different team members from what was done with the SCIG project. So I'll leave it at that. In terms of the peer review, it's a great comment. I know in the Port of Long Beach, we instituted a peer review, which we have experts outside of the consulting firms and the sub-consultants preparing the technical analysis do a peer review. I think Ms. Greenwood has raised an excellent point, and it's something that Mr. Cannon and I were just discussing. And that is something that we can do and ensure that there is a peer review. In terms of opening it up to the public, that's exactly what would happen in terms of the process that CEQA allows for. The public review of a draft environmental document on this proposed project. That's when the public and all stakeholders will have the opportunity to go page by page and scrutinize, ask questions, provide comments on the adequacy of the analysis that we've completed.
Okay.
May I just add?
Yeah.
Environ will not do the HRA or the air quality analysis.
Okay. But, no, I think, just from my opinion, is that technical work's, what, at least 90% done probably. So there's going to be very little additional or any changes really to the technical content. It's what it sounds like.
Correct.
And you can confirm that. That's what it sounds like to me. So basically, they're just going to do the administrative process of basically putting it all together. If there are a few more technical details, it would be the subcontractors, whoever's working that detail. So they're just going to be the integrator, basically, of putting it all together.
That's correct. There's about, when I say 90% complete, it's for the technical studies and the modeling and the comprehensive analysis that AQMD and the subconsultants are working on to date, JPA staff. We're about 50 or 60% done with the admin draft EIR. And so that's really what we would be working with Environ. Environ would be taking the day-to-day, putting everything together into a comprehensive administrative draft EIR that we then would go through our own internal QA/QC, including a peer review of the technical documents. So yes, that's basically what we would like to move forward with Environ. That's the item before the board today.
Okay, thank you.
And I just have one question, Rick, and that would be, just to be clear, that AQMD staff or their designee oversaw the subcontractors' technical work, reviewed that, and that is something that has been done and reviewed by AQMD with, based on their oversight or their designees' oversight.
Up into the point that certain technical studies and certain analysis was completed. There was some of the analysis that, the 10%, 15% that is still need to be completed, as well as kind of fleshed out and cleaned up that they probably haven't seen. So in all fairness to AQMD staff, I wouldn't say that they've seen everything and they've blessed everything, but they have overseen a majority of the completed work that will be moved forward through the completion of the administrative draft EIR.
So just to maybe allay some of the concerns by some of the people in the audience that spoke, it won't be a technical work product by Environ. It's a technical work product by sub-consultants who work under the direction of AQMD.
I would say it's a technical work product of the CEQA lead agency, which is the ICTF JPA.
Mr. Chair, can I put you
Yeah,
on?
I think it's worthwhile. I'm sorry.
There was mention of and comment by staff that the peer review issue was a good idea, and I guess my question is either both of staff and or our attorney, how can we either amend or ask for that the peer review be included? Now, obviously, Environ wouldn't do that because the peer review is meant to be somebody else, and or somebody else other than the technical sub-consultants who have already been doing the work. And whether or not that needs another contract authorization, or just if we give direction to the staff, and particularly our executive director, under the authority of his $150,000 that he has to authorize a contract for that work, could we, is it appropriate to ask for it at this time were we to consider an approval of the Environ amendment to the contract that's presented to us, to augment that and request staff to act on and bring forward, whether for the executive director's approval or not, the process by which this would be a peer review conducted by our staff of the Environ and sub-consultant work as just another level of review before the draft is ready to be put out.
It's certainly within the authority of the board to direct the executive director to take an action such as that, which would be to use his authority that you've previously given him in conjunction with your current instruction to go out and contract with another entity to do a peer review. We don't have that contract on the agenda at this time, of course, so you can't act to actually create that contract right now. But you can couple your approval of this, if you decide to do that, with a direction to the executive director.
Yes.
Madam Vice Chair, there is an approval on a previous agenda item number 3, for the fiscal year 2011-2012 budget that did include contingency for this sort of thing. As our legal counsel has described, we would have to keep that dollar amount under the executive director's authority, but if it's the direction of the board, we could certainly undertake a peer review within that pre-approved dollar amount.
Well, if I could, if it's appropriate, and I appreciate staff assistance, that, well, I think we already have a motion and a second for the approval of the First Amendment to the contract before us. If I could add as an addition to that, that we would act to direct the staff, the executive director, to take advantage within the budgeted amount and his legal authority discretion to bring a contract, well, not to bring a contract, but to execute a contract with consultation of staff with an entity or a group of sub-consultant entities to conduct that peer review when it's appropriate for the document, in the document's preparation.
Okay.
So if I can add that as an amendment to the...
Okay.
Yeah, I just had a question just to clarify a lot of what we're saying about the technical studies are 90% done and the administrative draft is 50% done. The technical studies are the background modeling. It's not the determination of significance.
Correct.
Right? That's the work that needs to be done, the other 50% in the EIR. So that's a critical part of the work. It's more than just pulling things together. It's that determination of significance.
No, I think that's a great point, Commissioner Nats. I'm used to calling her Geraldine, my boss. It's a great point because when Rick said, 80, well, let's say 90% done, the last...
Chris got nervous.
Yeah, I did. The last 10%, as you all know, is the hard slogging. And the last 10% really it's the significance determinations, it's the mitigation measures that you try to work through to decide which ones are the right ones. We've already got a list of mitigation measures that we think apply, but it's that last stuff, and it's the hardest part really to get this stuff done. And so, yes, that's exactly right.
And that's the part we have to be very involved. I don't mean
Staff.
me, but staff.
Staff
Yes.
has got to really direct that. We can't, the consultants can only sort of hand that to us, and then we've got to make decisions jointly, the JPA, Rick and I, and the rest of staff, about what's what. And this, Commissioner Schrammick, is your point. How do we make the documents different? There's where the documents get different, is those final decisions about what's significant, what's not, how it should be dealt with, how it shouldn't be dealt with, what measures ought to be incorporated as mitigation, as conditions, as lease measures, as whatever it is that we, as a staff, decide to do.
And that decision is further verified and strengthened by outside peer review.
Yes.
Pursuant to Commissioner Vizikowski's
Yeah,
request.
exactly. Yeah.
And ultimately, bear in mind, of course, it's your decision as the board. It has the ultimate CEQA document that you will be asked to certify at some point by staff. Ultimately, that's going to be your independent decision, whether you decide that it's in compliance with CEQA and what mitigations to require and so forth. Those kinds of things are your decision for a future date. It's not the consultant's decision. The law requires the document reflect your independent decision making, your independent judgment, not that of the consultant.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we have a motion that was amended to add the peer review,
I'll second.
and I think it was seconded.
You'll say you
Yes,
just
you okay?
agree,
You
just
okay?
agree to
You-
the amendment.
Yeah, the amendment. Good. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passed unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Okay, number 8.
Mr. Chair, item number 8 is similar to item number 7. It's an amendment to an existing contract for the vendor for the EIR preparation, and this is with Sohagi Law Group. The proposed amendment would continue assistance for outside legal counsel in preparation of the environmental document in compliance with California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, and the Clean Air Act, and other environmental issues associated with preparation of the ICTF modernization project. The agreement provides for legal review of all environmental documents and liaison between the proposed or recently approved contractor, Environ, in preparation of the draft environmental document and the final document. Similar to the previous item, the JPA entered into a one-year, $150,000 contract with Sohagi Law Group for legal support services. The proposed amendment would continue these services for the remaining preparation of the environmental document and its review process. The recommendation is to extend the contract 3 years and increase the amount from $150,000 to $315,000. Again, these costs are reimbursable by the project applicant, the Union Pacific Railroad. We're also recommending the board make a finding that this activity is administrative and will not result in direct or indirect physical changes to the environment, and as such is not a project as defined by the CEQA guidelines sections 15378.
Okay, thank you. Board members, questions, comments?
Just again, I don't know if I heard, was Sohagi previously under contract with the JPA? Was Sohagi previously under contract with AQMD? I mean, is this another one of these continuation? And if not, are they, if they weren't a continuation, are they newly involved in this? And if someone could just go through a little bit more of the scope of work of what they will be doing. For instance, I mean, in some instances, a law firm, particularly a law firm that has environmental expertise, can act, if not as a peer group, because they're not technical, they certainly understand CEQA and the level, how high the bar is set in what a document that could be presented to someone for adequacy and or certification has to meet. Is this newly being brought into the equation now because we're at this point, or just explain that to me?
You got it?
Yeah. A couple items. The Sohagi law firm has been involved in the preparation or review of the preparation of the environmental document, working directly for the Joint Powers Authority. They were not contracting with the AQMD. This agreement has become necessary because of the length of time in the preparation of the environmental document. So we're recommending that we continue the services of Sohagi. They've provided, I believe, excellent legal assistance. I'd defer to our legal counsel if you can elaborate on that.
The Port of Los Angeles and the Joint Powers Authority have been working with the Sohagi firm for a number of years. We find them highly qualified specialists in environmental and CEQA law. Margaret Sohagi is known throughout the state for her skills in this area, and in fact, she has been selected to train CEQA judges in the state of California in the law. So we find her very capable and their advice very conservative and reliable.
Okay.
And if I could also clarify, there was a 3-year agreement that just expired in September. So it was September 2008 through September of 2011. That expired, hence the 1-year agreement was entered into in September because this board wasn't going to meet until November.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That was Joy Krause from the JPA Assistant City Attorney. I think I butchered that, but for those who aren't aware who is speaking.
Okay, let's see. I think I asked for comments. Do we have a motion? Do we have a motion?
So move.
Okay.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passed unanimously. Thank you. Okay, item number 9.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the last item that requires a board vote. Following item 9 is item number 10, which is public comment on any of the non-agenda items. Item number 9 is similar to items 8 and 7. It's a recommendation to amend a contract for assistance on the preparation of the environmental document. E2 Managed Tech is been providing project management services and support activities for the JPA over the last 3 years. Their agreement in the amount of $471,605 was to conclude, and did conclude, September 3rd of 2011. Because we did not have a JPA meeting, we are requesting at this time that the JPA board approve the amendment to this contract retroactive to September 3rd and to allow continuation of their services for the period of 3 additional years to make this a 6-year agreement. We are not requesting additional funds. There's a little bit more than $100,000 remaining in this contract that's unspent that would be utilized. We are, however, requesting that their schedule of fees be adjusted, given that this agreement would be potentially extended to up to 6 years. Again, no additional funds are being recommended at this time, and these costs are reimbursable by Union Pacific. We're also recommending the board make the following finding: that this activity is administrative and will not result in direct or indirect physical changes to the environment. As such, it is not a project and is defined as defined by CEQA guideline sections 15378.
Thank you, Mr. Thiessen. Yeah, Geraldine.
Go ahead, Geraldine.
I was just going to ask how their project management services differ from the project management services that are going to be provided by Environ.
It's a real good question, and I would say that E2 Managed Tech is doing everything that is not kind of involved in compiling the environmental document. All the activities here tonight, for example, preparing the room, all the JPA coordination, preparing board packets. Their services are not as robust as some of the other vendors, such as Sohagi or Environ or AQMD, but they perform support staff to the JPA. So it's not necessarily environmental EIR preparation itself, but support services.
Are they responsible for the website and the information which we heard earlier? Okay, well, I think let's make that point, that the clarity or adequacy of the material that is assembled and put on the website for public information and access was of concern as expressed tonight. And also, I think the point that was made earlier about having a complete set of the documents available at the meeting for those who don't have web access also makes sense, and perhaps a couple of them. Yes. So if we can make note of that to this E2 Managed Tech entity, that, particularly as we get more documents and more intensity of concerns out there, that this is going to have to be stepped up. So let's see if we can, at least on the staff oversight of this project management team, make those points known.
Points very well taken, and we will make sure this vendor handles all those requests.
Okay, that's actually, I think, excellent point, is they'll be managing when the draft EIR comes out, the distribution of it, whether it's on the website, whether it's on CDs, will they, or how is that managed?
They'll work closely with JPA staff for those sorts of things, like posting items to the website, public meetings that we will have, for example. When the draft is released, we will have similar meetings such as this. However, the JPA staff along with the sub-consultants who are actually preparing the environmental document, such as Environ, would do, I would say, the majority of the work. E2 Managed Tech will provide support services as described.
Yeah, Commissioner, it's administrative project management, and since the JPA does not have staff, and we are staff, adjunct staff, I like to call myself, working on, my primary duties, having E2 Managed Tech fill in this role, I think really helps us out in terms of, once again, administrative project management support.
Great, thank you. Can I have a motion for this item?
I'll move.
Okay, I'll second it. Anybody in the audience wish to comment on this? There were no. Okay. No comments. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passed unanimously. Okay. Yeah, Mr. Steinke.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt. I am going to have to leave. We weren't sure that Commissioner Mizikowski was going to be here, and obviously we're glad that she is. And at one point during the course of the day, I represented the quorum, and I'm going to have to leave now. What I did want to do is introduce my successor. This will be my last ICTF meeting. And Chris Lytle, the new executive director, is in the audience. If Chris would just stand up and be recognized and welcome. I thought it was important for Chris to be at this meeting, knowing that he will hopefully be sitting in this chair for future ICTF meetings. The Board of Harbor Commissioners at the Port of Long Beach will take up his appointment to this board at its next board meeting. So I want to just tell you that I have to go, and but I wanted to be here for the votes, and I will continue to watch this with great interest over the next months and years as the ICTF continues to operate. So look forward to watching the progress of this board and the project.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Steinke.
Thank you.
Thanks for everything you've done.
Yeah, thank you.
All what? How many years is this?
At least 14.
14 years. Okay, item number 10.
Just to follow up on the previous item, Mr. Chair, it is the custom of the ICTF JPA to have the standing executive directors from both ports and a harbor commissioner from both ports on the JPA board. Mr. Lytle, who is our incoming executive director, January 1st, has said he will be here in the audience to hear any comments that speakers may have on item number 10, which is the last item on the agenda. And just to clarify what Mr. Steinke said, on the board agenda for December 5th, which is our next Long Beach Board of Harbor Commissioners, there's a staff recommendation to the Harbor Commission to appoint Mr. Lytle as the replacement for Mr. Steinke on the JPA board.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thiessen. I'll just tell Mr. Lytle that it's going to be a hot seat starting next year. Welcome. Okay, item number 10.
Item number 10 is a report on the preparation of the EIR by the JPA staff. There is no action requested by the board. There's no vote on an item for voting's sake, but we've heard some of the discussion already. Mr. Cannon and Mr. Cameron are here to discuss the preparation of the EIR and the status of it. We also have a couple speakers. Two have spoken previously. Mr. James Johnson from the Long Beach City Council member who is here, and Andrea Harico, who have noticed that they would like to speak to item number 10. If there are other people in the audience, I would ask you to fill out a speaker card on item number 10 and give it to the staff in the back and bring it forward. We'll announce their names. Also, as I had mentioned previously, the Port of Los Angeles has publicly released an EIR for another proposed rail project by the Burlington Northern Santa Fe called the Southern California International Gateway, or SCIG project. The SCIG project is not within the purview of the ICTF Joint Powers Authority, and therefore public comments about the SCIG project should not be made here tonight. Any comments on the SCIG EIR that are made here will not be reviewed by the Port of Los Angeles as lead agency or recorded as public comments on the official EIR comment docket. So please see the Port of Los Angeles website at www.portoflosangeles.org for information on how to provide public comments on the SCIG EIR directly to the Port of LA. Now, I had mentioned this previously, but we may have had a few folks who had come in the room late, so I wanted to repeat that. And so with that, I would turn this over to Mr. Camera to give us an update.
You're first.
I will try to be short and sweet on this. I think we've actually covered.
What are you asking? If
Shouldn't the public speak first? Or?
no, why don't we do a status so at least they hear, from your what the status is.
I think through items number 6 through 9, I think we've covered a lot of the status and where we are today and a little bit of the changeover. One of the things I would like to echo is Mr. Cannon's, not Cameron, Mr. Cannon's comments in compliment of AQMD, Susan Nakamura in particular, and the AQMD staff. They worked on this for almost 3 years, 2.5, 3 years. And I participated in many meetings with Susan and her staff and others at AQMD. I think there's been a lot of lessons learned, a lot of learning on both sides. I personally have learned a better understanding of their point of view on a few things, and hopefully we can carry that through as we move forward in drafting up this environmental document for public review. So thank you, Susan. Thank you, AQMD. I'm sure they're not going to go away. They're going to take their traditional role, and they will be here part of the process. We did formally have a transition so that we can keep this project moving forward. We did that effective November 15th, and AQMD was very helpful in that transition. They continue to be, so thank you again. We do have Environ working now with the sub-consultants, and that was a pretty good transition. We've had a couple transition meetings. And the things that are remaining for us to move forward in terms of the technical, I've talked about the 90% and 50%. Those are general numbers I'm throwing out there off the top of my head. In terms of the key technical analysis, we need to finalize the air quality and the health risk assessment, as well as the noise. There were some final data needs that we had and some many discussions we had about the data and how to use them in the modeling and some of the analysis. The next would be to complete the combined cumulative analysis, which will have the combined SCIG analysis with the ICTF proposed project and the alternatives as well as the EGA section of the document as well, which all rely upon the technical studies that need to be completed. As of right now, we're working on a schedule this week to get us to an endpoint of a final draft environmental document for public review. We're hoping to get that wrapped up and going through our own QA/QC review, in addition to now including a peer review, and hopefully we're targeting late February as a time frame. It's a hard goal. It's something that myself and Chris have committed to, and with the team. And so with that being said, I'll conclude the status of where we are. I think we've talked all evening about a lot of things and changes, and I would just open up for questions either to the board or hear the public comments. Would you want to add anything, Chris?
No, well said. Everything was well said.
Okay, and I don't know how many people are going to speak on this, but we may have some questions, and we appreciate your openness, on any questions that come up, during the public comment. So what I'd like to do is, first of all, invite Councilman James Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Ceramic, and I appreciate the opportunity to come back here and speak again. I want to talk to the bigger picture issue of, what this JPA is here to do and while looking at the project. Really talk about where I think the community wants to go. I think where we want to go is to a place where we can grow the port, bring the benefits, the jobs, the revenues, everything we know we need without coming at the direct detriment to our neighborhoods. For so long, the community's seen a nexus between port growth and the erosion of their quality of life, particularly here in West Long Beach and surrounding communities. There is a way to change that. I think it's a paradigm change to allow the growth and all those benefits to come, the regional benefits, without the detriment of the local community. That way is zero emissions goods movement. I believe there must be an analysis of zero emissions goods movement and that option in the EIR. There's been some discussion of the Keston study, of which we're all familiar. Let me just refresh our memory on what that study concluded. The study concluded that zero emissions is technically feasible, but not economically feasible with the assumptions that were made at the time. What are those assumptions? There are two primary assumptions. One, that there would be no subsidy of zero emissions goods movement, and two, that there would not be regulations requiring people to use it. You'd be able to have to compete directly with dirty diesel goods movement. I agree with the Keston study. Without subsidies or regulations, we will never see zero emissions goods movement. Clearly, that's the wrong question. The question needs to be, what package of subsidies and regulations do we need to get us to zero emissions goods movement? I believe zero emissions will only come when public policymakers demand it. By zero emissions, I mean any conveyance system, whether truck or otherwise, that does not pollute communities. There are a number of technologies, so I'm not specifying any technology. Simply any technology where you can move the goods without polluting neighborhoods. Only when public policymakers demand to see zero emissions and put together enforceable commitments to get there will the market respond. The market will not invest in the technology. The market will not bring down the cost of making this happen until they can see there's business to be made doing that. At the core, I really think this is a public policy issue. Is zero emissions goods movement important or not? And that's for the JPA to decide. And what I'd like to ask is for the JPA members, we've talked about this EIR, and staff brought up a good point. Ultimately, you direct the JPA. You direct the EIR preparation. Not just the acceptance, I believe, of the ultimate JPA, but I believe it's your responsibility to direct staff in what direction you'd like it to go. So what I would like to see is direction from the JPA board members to staff saying, this JPA, the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles together, are looking for a zero emissions goods movement option in this EIR. You control the EIR. The community is looking to the three of you. I believe we can get there. We can get to that end result where we can grow the ports, grow the economy, have those benefits without all the air quality impacts and the destruction we've seen over the decades in the area. So please give that consideration. I appreciate your support.
Thank you very much. Next, Doug.
The next speaker is Andrea Herico, and that is our last speaker on item number 10.
Thank you. Again, I'm Andrea Ricco from USC. My last name is spelled Hricko for the court reporter. I'd like to just tell you a little chronology of some things that have happened with Union Pacific. In 2006, Union Pacific went to the New Mexico legislature and said, we want to build a rail yard, a huge intermodal facility in Santa Teresa, New Mexico. And we need a diesel fuel tax exemption, and we need land, and we want to move forward with this. And fast forward to 2011, they have done all that. They've gotten land, I think, from the Bureau of Land Management in the federal government, like donated to them or given to them. And all these hoops have been passed, and they've now, they broke ground on a rail yard in 2011. However, it doesn't appear that they ever told the JPA back in 2006 and 2007 that they had plans to build that rail yard. And nor in 2009 when the NOP was released and we had hearings on it. And what's important about it is that I've been following the press about that rail yard in Santa Teresa, New Mexico. And it clearly is an alternative that has to be considered in the EIR for this project. The NOP stated that the EIR is going to include an evaluation of a range of alternatives, including alternative locations, on-dock rail, and inland port facilities. So just so that you know, the press in Santa Teresa, which is next door to El Paso, calls this a port in the desert. And what UP says about it is that this railroad intends to use the new facility as a virtual extension of the Long Beach port facilities, sorry about that, LA, of its Long Beach port facilities, with ocean freighters being unloaded in bulk onto trains bound for Santa Teresa from Long Beach. I mean, this is the UP spokesperson in Santa Teresa saying, we imagine, well, I'll quote the rest of what she said, UP currently is moving 40 trains a day on the Sunset Corridor with a goal of 70 to 90 trains a day. The cargoes from Southern California will be broken down in Santa Teresa for shipping to diverse destinations around the country. The objective is to try to reduce the bottleneck and congestion at the Southern California ports, says Zoe Richmond, UP spokesperson. That facility is currently planning to handle 250,000 containers a year, but it's going to sit on 2,200 acres of open land. And so what they are suggesting is, clearly with her statements, that we could have on-dock, they're expecting on-dock rail at the ports of LA and Long Beach, trains that are not assembled by destination with the cargo containers assembled, but just load the trains at the ports of LA and Long Beach, send the trains up the Alameda Corridor. It's about 400 or 500 miles to Santa Teresa. The trains go to Santa Teresa where they are with cranes unloaded, as we've spoken about dozens of times at these JPA and various port meetings. Peter Greenwald, I remember, very specifically calling for this, I believe at a JPA meeting. And so once the containers from here get to Santa Teresa, they are divided up into their different destinations, and that location is a prime spot because they currently use El Paso to send these trains to Chicago and to east to Houston and to the East Coast. So I urge the JPA to demand that the EIR look at this as an alternative, and I would actually encourage the JPA members to go to Santa Teresa, New Mexico with Union Pacific to evaluate this project, because I think it means we do not need to expand the ICTF in a neighborhood, lower income minority neighborhood that's already really being severely impacted by diesel exhaust. I'm happy to submit all the documents to the JPA, assuming that the contractor who's hired can get them to all the board members, and maybe even put them online. And but I think that it really is. If Union Pacific themselves is saying that this is a way to reduce the bottleneck and congestion in LA and get the containers to the rest of the country, I think that we need to be paying attention to it very seriously.
Andrew.
Thank you.
Andrew, may I?
Thank you.
Hello. Andrew, may I just remind you,
Go ahead, Chris.
if I may, I can't tell if it's, there we go, it sounds like it works now. Please don't forget to resubmit those comments and thoughts and technical work when the document is released and we actually have a comment period.
No, I want this to be, I don't want to wait till the comment period, Chris. I want this to be something that is on the books right now, on the record, and to be considered in the document so that it's part of the document when that document EIR is released.
All right, I just wanted to make sure we made clear what you were doing.
Yeah, I would much rather not be complaining later that it wasn't evaluated. What I'm asking for is, it's something that really sounds like great promise. UP says it can work, and I think it should be evaluated before the EIR comes out as part of the draft EIR. And I'm a little surprised that Union Pacific has been working on this since 2006 and has not bothered to present this to the JPA as an alternative.
If I can just comment on, add on Chris's comment, that as you said, you were going to get it to us as the JPA board. I think the most important thing you could do is get it to the staff, those two over there who are going to oversee environment and all the consultants. And when they said that the last 10% of the work is not only putting it all together, but doing not only analysis, but I would assume the alternative section is one of the more critical later or last elements, so getting them to that information now is the best for their consideration of inclusion.
Well, you might consider I don't know what you would call it here, a resolution or an order or something where you direct staff to evaluate this.
Well,
that might be one thing that you could do, because I think it's really important that this opportunity be evaluated in the draft EIR, and I would hate to have it slip away as an opportunity that's not evaluated. So I hope there might be direction to staff on that. Thank you.
Well, I don't think we had any action. I heard the city attorney.
This is simply a staff report. We don't have any action item agendized for the board to take any action with regard to the EIR, and in fact, that would really be premature to have them weigh in. It's a staff level function right now to prepare a draft, and then they'll have their opportunity, and you'll have your opportunity to submit your comments. In fact, what's going to come out eventually will be just a draft EIR. That's why it's called a draft. That's why we have a public review process. That's why it's not final when it comes out. It is a draft.
I understand what a draft EIR is. I am asking
Andrea,
that there be some direction to staff to look at this alternative.
Yeah, we will examine everything that you put in, but you have to understand the process and respect the process.
And the only other point, I can't, with what I know today, pick and choose to direct staff to conclude whatever alternatives. That is their function. But I want them to have this information that you have as they have to do that work in the next year.
Yeah.
And we'll have it today. So.
Mr. Chair, we did receive one additional request to speak, Joan Greenwood, on item number 10.
Good evening once again. I wanted to comment a little bit about the process of an EIR. The EIR process for a project as it is set up is really meant to occur over a one-year period. And one of the difficulties that I've had with both of these projects as well as the LNG project is that with the permission of the applicant, you drag them over year after year. And like Andrea, I find I come to meetings, I make comments, bring information to the attention of staff and the JPA. I remember doing so about ultrafines in 2009 and actually gave a scientific paper. But what happens is we then get into this EIR process. I'm sorry, the EIR process represents a minimum standard. And that to say that comments are brought out when we extend the process, that the fact that this isn't an official EIR comment period and say, therefore, these comments aren't part of the record, I believe that if the public communicates it to you as the board have the option of giving staff direction so that we don't get to the point we're at the draft EIR. Now, I have been dropped from the email distribution list. I don't know why, and if Patrick Kennedy hadn't told me about the meeting tonight, I wouldn't have known it. I didn't have a chance to look at the materials ahead of time. So it does happen, and I don't know how we get dropped off of it. I mean, I certainly didn't lose my interest, but when I asked about it, I said, well, nothing much happening, then all of a sudden I find out there's a meeting. So these things happen, and I think where you say to the public that, gosh, if it should come up that the comment period is, and you've got some other function, your employer has sent you out of town or whatever, that now the burden is you to communicate through this formal process and not as we're going along, especially for these EIRs that drag out forever. Quite truthfully, I find it hard to believe that this one has taken this amount of time. It's not really that difficult. HRAs, the technical portions of it. So what we're seeing is from the time you put out your notice of preparation until we get to the point of the draft EIR, a lot has changed. And then and to go back and say we're putting on the burden on other people to come in and bring us up to speed, but we're not going to consider it if there were any meetings along the line. So I think that, yes, anything that is said at any meeting with this GPA related to this particular project should have some input to the board, and the board should be allowed to make that input. Because again, as we said, the important thing is the threshold of significance and the alternatives and the mitigation. I think you do have the right to make that input, that this is not necessarily something that can only come under the minimum standards set by the EIR process. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. First of all, I got some comments here on this. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak right now? Just want to double check. Okay, thank you. What I want to find out is when will we have another meeting of the JPA? Because I would like to have one, and I know we have busy schedules, but I'd like to have one fairly soon. We're going to talk about the peer review, and personally, I would like, we can't direct you to give us an answer, and I sure don't want to put these in the direct and put it in the IR. We don't have any actionable thing that we're working on right now, but I would like to just hear some comments on these on what Councilman Johnson spoke about and what Ms. Rico spoke about. I'd like to hear some comments on that come back to us in our next meeting.
Mr. Chairman, we have not scheduled a JPA meeting for next year. It would be my recommendation we would do that in the spring sometime, consistent with the release of a draft EIR. Assuming we can meet that schedule, that would certainly be our target. I'll defer to the experts on some of the reaction to Ms. Greenwood and.
Well, I don't need an answer on that right now. I think they need to take a look at it and think about it, and there's nothing actionable right now.
I mean, I can say we heard you, and we appreciate your comments, and we're not going to take them lightly. So thank you for coming today, and we're going to do our best to produce a good document and to address the issues that you've raised. But I can tell you that all of them are issues that have already been raised, but you've reinforced a lot of them, and to the extent, Andrea, you've got something new, please bring it to me. I'll see it.
Can I perhaps augment your request and whether or not we have a meeting soon? I mean, obviously, if we have it in spring, that's obviously sooner than our normal cycle. But in the interim, particularly after the staff sets forth, I think I heard you say that you were looking to do a sit-down with all the new parties who are now under contract to the JPA to set a very, if not a hard schedule, at least a schedule and a forecast. What I would like to see in addition to that possible schedule of a draft, also if the staff could circulate to us and or put on our website what other things would be considered. For instance, with a schedule and a possibility of a release of a draft, what and how many and where would some public meetings occur so the public comments could be made and taken, what kind of schedule, what kind of comment period, all of that, which is, I assume, going to be part of a discussion and recommendation and consideration by staff within the next, 30 to 60 days. And if you then have a recommendation, if you circulate that to the JPA members as well as to the public, so at least everyone has a knowledge base of what we're looking at, and then when we see that, as our staffs contact us to see whether or not there is a reason for a JPA meeting either in the interim or prior to or around that or related in that to some way. But I would know better of the reason for a JPA meeting once I see that forecasted schedule.
Perfect. Okay?
Okay, we'll certainly put that together.
Okay. Any other comments by board members? Okay, I really thank everybody for coming here. We're trying to get this information out, let people know where we're going, and we will definitely make sure the website has all the information that we can get on there to make sure you can get on there, get the information, you can see where we are, see what schedule we're trying to work to, and we'll stay on top of it. So I want to thank everybody for coming here, and we are adjourned without objection.